Mike has been an e-commerce consultant for over a decade, so since 2001, has worked with huge brands, so has advised Argos, Dell on how to do e-commerce, but equally with loads of successful SMEs, advising them on the same. He is both an educator and a practitioner in the e-commerce space, in the analytics space, and he's always got some actionable nuggets of advice. So, Mike, welcome back.
Thank you. All right, thank you. So just to adjust the accents, you need to move 3,000 miles east and about 500 miles north, and then you'll be fine. So I'm going to talk to you about conversion optimization and try and give you a few systematic processes for trying to optimize conversion. And I do like this. It's attributed to Bill Shankly. As far as I can find out, he never actually said it, but it's one of these that he said something really cumbersome and awkward, and it's been simplified into this. Football is a simple game made complicated by idiots. So I'm going to start with the simple part, and then I'm going to be the idiot that makes it complicated towards the end. I'm sorry to tell you, but we'll deal with that later. So what I want to talk about is I want to look at the type of testing and optimization that you can just kind of get on and do. Because there's a whole big emphasis these days on testing. And I think that there's a whole bunch of stuff that just makes an awful lot of sense, and you just need to get on and do it. Then there's a whole bunch of stuff where you don't know what makes sense, and therefore you do actually have to test. So as we go from the top to the bottom, we really do need to start thinking about more process focus, more structured ways of testing, and specifically I want to talk to you about some of the mistakes that a huge number of people make in doing split testing. So I want to go through a whole bunch of simple things. I want to go through a couple of big things, and then I want to talk about the biggest thing of all, which is evidence-based improvement. So British cycling has gone through a remarkable transformation. You know, we were pretty much nowhere, and then suddenly we found we were winning the Tour de France, and we were getting more medals in the Olympics and the World Championships than any other single country. And this is largely attributed to this guy, Dave Brailsford, who has made a bit of a name for himself in talking about this principle of the aggregation of marginal gains. So what he wanted to do was he wanted to look at absolutely every single aspect of cycling and see whether he could make a 1% improvement. So he did things like he checked the tire pressure of the bikes, and he tried to work out whether very small changes in tire pressure could actually make a consistent difference in performance. And he looked at each of these 1% improvements that he could get. And by keeping on aggregating them, what of course happens is that as you aggregate, the 1% start to accumulate. And if the second 1% gives you 1% of the first 1% you actually get compound interest. So it does accelerate away if you keep on increasing the marginal gain. So I think that there are a few things. This is most definitely not a 1%, but it's an example that is reasonably well publicized, which O'Neill did, looking at just optimizing for mobile. And they found some remarkable increases in conversion rate and revenue growth, simply because their site was not working particularly well previously for mobile. Now, I would be very surprised if any of you are going to get this sort of performance gains. You know, they're going to be small. But my point here is that the small gains are still worth having, especially if they accumulate with other small gains. So a relatively straightforward one that most of you, I'm sure, will at least have looked at and hopefully acted upon is designed for mobile. Image carousels. They're one of these that I think has been a bit of a fad. Last time I checked, 8 out of the top e-commerce sites in the UK had an image carousel. And if you just pause and think about it for a moment, this is the John Lewis one. And it's on the home page. And there are 3 images. So you get this one for 5 seconds, then you get that one for 5 seconds, and then you get that one for 5 seconds. Okay, who amongst you reckons you're going to be on the home page of John Lewis long enough to look at the third one? So what I actually think is happening is that I don't think this has got anything to do with customers. I think it's to do with the politics of organizations. Because this person who does headphones was in the meeting where they talked about the homepage, and he thumped on the table, he or she thumped on the table and said, I want my image on the homepage. Oh, for goodness sake, okay, yes, you can have it in a carousel. Sadly, you're going third. So I don't believe that this actually gets hardly any traffic. And if anyone knows any better, please correct me. So image carousels are now starting to get some criticism, some very rightful attention to say, are they actually working or are they there for political reasons? Would it actually be better to use that real estate more constructively, and if need be, to use it in a more data-focused way? Many sites have got lifestyle images. Few sites have actually got the products in the lifestyle images clickable. And it's a bit of a pain to do image maps and all of that malarkey, but if you have got these lifestyle images, and if they're an important part of your journey, and if somebody sees something and thinks, oh, that's quite nice, click, 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 oh, damn, it's not clickable. I've now got to find it. What is it called? I don't know, I can't search. I've got to try and navigate my way through to it. So there's a lot of hassles involved in seeing a lifestyle image, thinking you like something, and then trying to find it, and making it clickable is actually not that hard. Oh my goodness, is this sacrilege? Removing social sharing buttons? Surely not. However, they could reduce page load time. You could avoid showing customers negative or perhaps hugely unimpressive social proof. And you could remove distractions. So how much are your social sharing buttons actually being used? Here is a test publicized by Visual Website Optimizer where buttons and no buttons claiming a 12% increase in click-through. So it's only to the next stage. It's not actually a conversion metric, but it's just quite interesting and quite provocative. I think one of the arguments is that the social sharing buttons, when they have lots of endorsement, and they're saying, look, dozens and dozens and dozens of people have liked this. Absolutely great. No doubt about that at all. Social sharing buttons where you've got one like and no tweets. Perhaps not just quite so rich, perhaps not just quite so endorsing, not quite so reinforcing. Okay, so that's a whole bunch of simple things. We're going to start going into slightly bigger issues. How not to run an A/B test. So the first thing to think about is that an A/B test has the great value of having some statistical underpinning. So when I do an A/B test, what I'm effectively asking is that if I varied the A's and the B's at random, would I get random outputs? And the answer to that question, of course, is statistical. You have to say that my null hypothesis is that I will show A and B 50% of the time, and I expect the goals to be achieved 50% of the time according to A and B. How do I tell? Well, the main thing that you typically do in stats is you say that I'm going to accept a degree of difference from random, and I'm going to take that as my threshold. And typically, you would take a level of about 5% statistical significance. So what that means is that I am 95% confident that the difference in goals that I'm seeing is not due to random chance. So therefore, if I look at my split test on 20 consecutive days, one of them will be significant by random chance. So the big mistake that so many people are doing is they apply a split test, and then they maybe check it 5 days later. Oh, not significant. 6 days, still not significant. Give it a couple of days, sure it'll be working then. Check it in day 10, not significant. Day 11, day 12. One of these is going to be going green. All the lights are going to have gone green. This is statistically significant. Excellent. Switch off the test, put it to 100%. You have not shown a statistically significant effect. All you've done is cheated the statistics. So if you look at the actual results from a split test, this is what happened. So you're looking at the probability of this being a real effect. And you will see that it started not far off 50%. So there's a 50-50 chance that it was going to be, there is a 50% chance this is completely random. And then it started to go down and, oh, look, we've got significance. Check on day 7, it's significant, switch the test off. We've got a significant result. No, we haven't. Because the day after, it turned to non-significant, non-significant, non-significant. Oh, it's back again, it's significant. But if you give it the time to settle, you find that it is absolutely nowhere near significant. You do not have an effect here. But because of the vagaries of statistics, it has dipped into statistical significance for a day and then dipped out again. 1 in 20 days, roughly. So 1 in 20 days, you're going to get a false positive on your split test. So what's the solution? Well, a little bit complicated, but if you get into the procedure of doing it, it's not that complicated. You effectively need to look at the data you've got, work out, if I was expecting this much difference at this statistical significance, how many days do I have to let it run for? And then do not look at it until that period is finished. And if at the end of that period you have a significant result, believe it. If at the end of that period you do not have a significant result, you have not got a significant result. Do another test. And there are loads of tools out there that if you just search for how many split tests do I need to run, there will be a whole bunch of tools there that will allow you to do that. Unfortunately, you need to put a bit of data in order to get the right data out, so it's not entirely straightforward, but this is a big, big error that people are making, so just be cautious about it. So that is another aspect of split testing that I think is really important. This is actually from Etsy. But what they do is they have this culture of continuous experimentation. So bear in mind we started off at the top where we were doing nice simple things, and now we're getting down to the bottom where we're starting to do more complicated things. One of the things that has become increasingly common is to move from occasional split testing to strategic split testing. And strategic split testing, a bit like what Etsy is doing here, is where you try and identify what is it that I'm ultimately trying to achieve in my business. So I want to increase revenue, I want to increase profits, I want to increase turnover, I want to increase the number of retained customers I've got. Whatever that strategic objective is, you try and work out a split testing pathway to achieve it. So you can start split testing your acquisition channels, split testing your emails, split testing your PPC campaigns, split testing your display ads. Then you can start split testing your landing pages, split test your conversion pathways, split test your basket, split test your checkout. And by the time you get there, so long as you've got an eye on the prize, you can have this strategic testing going on. Where some companies are going to slightly more greater lengths, like Belron, the people who run Autoglass, they, when they find a test is significant, properly significant, they don't switch it to 100% and 0. So they don't take the winner and apply that across the entire site. They put 95% of the traffic through the winner, and they keep 5% on the loser. And what this does is it lets them see whether any of the circumstances that led to the winning test have changed. Are they getting slightly different patterns of traffic? Has a competitor changed? And it just gives them some traffic lights that they can say, whoa, that test that was a real winner 6 months ago has now gone orange. It looks like it's not different anymore. Something must have changed. But they are running about 600 tests concurrently. At every moment in time, they have 600 tests live. So this is industrial. This is factory farming split testing. So it's pretty big and pretty big commitment. Okay, let me move quickly on to evidence-based optimization. How do we start pulling a lot of these things together? How do we decide what to optimize? How do we focus our attention on the things that matter most? Well, this, for any of you who were here at the last presentation I gave, I talked about my good mate, Vilfredo Pareto, who produced the 80-20 rule, or the law of the vital few, and he came to the conclusion, firstly, that 80% of the land in Italy was owned by 20% of the people in Italy. And for the privilege of finding that out, he was then banned from Italy and had to move to Switzerland for the rest of his life. But effectively, it's the long tail curve. 20% of your customers account for 80% of sales. Is what I want to focus in on here. So, my proposition to you is that the most important thing that you can be measuring on a consistent basis, if I was to focus your attention on one thing, it is either your hero customers or your repeat customers, and you should be monitoring over time what is happening to them. Now, I've put on here an indication of what the expected variation on a month-to-month basis is. Let's say that's a 95th percentile. So I know that I would expect this to be jumping up and down inside these bands on a month-to-month basis. So what I want to check is where it goes out of scope. So if I look at average order value, it's gone up and then it's gone down. It's all within the band that I expect, so that's okay. It's not getting better. I'm not increasing my average order value from my retained customers, but it's okay. My cost of acquisition, how's that bouncing around? And interval to next purchase. Now, the reason that I'm particularly focused on these three is that they can go their own separate ways. So, for example, average order value might be absolutely fine, but interval to next purchase might be increasing, which means my customers are churning. And I've either got to stop the churn or I've got to fill the front of the sales funnel ever faster than I was doing previously. And we've got a couple of examples that I think James might be talking about in a moment or two, where if you see that there are things going wrong in the interval to purchase, in other words, if an increasing number of your regular 20% customers that generate 80% of your revenue, if they're starting to disappear, it can actually take quite a long time to get them back again. So if you only recognize, oh my God, I've lost a whole heap, then getting the customers to be acquired and then buy for the second time can actually take quite a period of time. So very often you will see e-commerce businesses going through big dips because they didn't keep their eye on this and they weren't able to act on it quickly. So you can also start slicing and dicing all of this. So here, for example, we can look down and we can see average order value is perhaps not too surprisingly, mostly coming from email. However, the cost of acquisition is quite low. However, the interval to purchase might be good or bad, depending on how regularly your email is going out. Quite often, you will get affiliates with quite good average order value, pretty high cost of acquisition, and pretty low in terms of interval to next purchase. So this is all hypothetical. But the most important thing is to work out what the graphs look like for you so that you can start fine-tuning. And looking at cost of acquisition overall is, in my view, much, much less relevant than looking at cost of acquisition for your repeat customers, which is the ones you really want to keep an eye on. So the most important thing for me is that you focus on the repeat customers, you segregate it into order value, cost of acquisition, interval to next purchase. That is the heart and soul of your business. You need to make sure that the interval to next purchase doesn't start increasing to the point at which you've got churn, and you need to make sure that the extent to which they're churning is being replaced consistently by new visitors, monitoring the visits, sales conversion, and likelihood to repurchase. So I think that this is the kind of keep your eye on the prize that I'd be urging you to do to make sure that you understand where most of your revenue is coming from and set up dashboards and metrics and monitoring processes that keep an eye on it on a regular basis so you can see the trends, and then you can split out the trends to look at causes. I hope there's something in there of interest. Any questions? More than welcome.
Thank you, Mike.